and welcome to Cookie Pocket, an attempt at a podcast. I'm Christian, and I'm joined by my friends and co-hosts Zach and Mitchell. And this is our first episode, the first time we've ever done a podcast, and this is new for all of us, so we're going to have some fun figuring it out together.
Yeah.
This primarily, or entirely, is a podcast about film and movies and cinema, and I'm going to invite each of my co-hosts to introduce themselves, starting with Zach.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Zach. You can find me on YouTube at City Mist Productions or on Twitter at City Mist Product. And I'm really a big fan of kind of experimental cinema, horror films, science fiction, a lot of kind of lower key stuff. I'm not a big fan of the big blockbusters necessarily.
All right. Thanks, Zach. Mitchell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Not really, but I'll do it anyway. My name's Mitchell, apparently, and I like movies a lot. I'll say that. And not as much as Zach, though, definitely. It's kind of weird. But, yeah, I like pretty much any type of movie, really, except rom-coms. But I've always been a fan of... I am a fan of blockbuster movies. But I also like extremely classic movies as well. A lot of, like, 40s war movies I like, which is kind of unique. But, just generally popular action movies and horror, obviously. Sci-fi, comedy. So, I delve into the weird stuff, but also the mainstream stuff as well, I would say.
Nice.
Man of many hats.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christian. I am a bit of a blockbuster pop culture person, you might say. Star Wars is definitely what's closest to my heart, and I'm a Marvel fan as well. But I try to diversify a little bit with some more musically focused products as well. And I'm a heavy nostalgia person, but I also like giving Zach's horror movies a try. And every day I'm trying to diversify a bit more, and I'm thankful for the professional touch that Zach and Mitchell can bring to this and help educate me.
Professional, that's high praise.
Yeah, I sincerely. Zach's too modest to say so, but he's directed several short films, and they're quite good. So take a look at his YouTube channel if you're interested in that. And I suppose I should mention, in addition to Zach's Twitter handle that he mentioned earlier, I have my own at Image Wandering Images, which is a spoof off of what Zach's used to be called. And Mitchell has his own critical Twitter account as well. Would you like to share that tag with us?
Yes, at Townfog, but the O in fog is 0.
Beautiful. we love to see it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So this being our intro episode, I thought we might spend some time discussing what the format of our typical podcast will be when we discuss a specific film, as this intro will kind of deviate from the form that we are seeking in the other episodes. So, Zach, do you want to give a bit of an overview about the film selection process and how our episodes will be focused around that?
Yeah, sure. So the overall idea is every Monday and Friday we're going to have an episode, and we're going to take turns picking the film that we're going to watch and then discuss that episode. And the films are going to be picked by each of us kind of in isolation. So the films should sort of reflect our personal tastes and also appeal to a kind of wide variety of different people who may actually listen to the podcast. So I may pick a weird horror film or an abstract art film, whereas Christian might pick kind of a bigger blockbuster movie or a Star Wars movie. And we're going to take turns selecting those, and in the episode we'll discuss overall what happened in the film, for those who may not have seen it, and then any critical points that the person who chose the film might want to bring up and discuss with the group.
Perfect. Well said. I don't have much to add. We all kind of shared a rough approximation of our genre preferences, and I think we all balance each other out quite well. So now we've reached the point in this intro where I was hoping we would each give a short speech about what film or movies mean to us in general. So Who would like to go first? I'll leave it open to the floor. Huh?
I guess I can give it a shot.
All right, great. Go for it.
So I myself am a film major in college right now. I am really passionate about film and cinema. When I was a lot younger, kind of the first thing I ever wanted to be was I wanted to be an author. And then I sort of started to realize over time that the stories I was writing, I was thinking about turning into movies eventually anyway. So I sort of thought, well, why not just write and make movies and cut out kind of the middleman position. I really like visual storytelling and communicating with an audience through angles and lighting and performance, just the tiny little aspects of cinema that can change everything and really create a distinguished style. That's kind of the thing that really appeals to me about cinema, is sort of telling a story exactly how you want it to be told.
Yeah. Great. Mitchell, would you like to tell us what film and movies mean to you?
No. No, they don't mean anything to me. That's why I'm here. So, I've always watched movies. I don't know about other human beings, but ever since movies existed from the dawn of time, I've always watched them. No, when I was younger, my first movie I saw in theaters was Spider-Man.
Okay.
This is the original Sam Raimi one. So, that was an experience. And then, just kind of like I'll say like the theatrical experience is definitely one thing, but also like having nostalgia about seeing like different creative minds coming from different backgrounds, working on completely different parts of the same big project. And I've always felt like I've really been into being part of a bigger, like thing, like a bigger goal. So like seeing that, like the creative side of it, but also seeing like the historical perspective of it, like even if a movie that comes out like 5 years ago is like, it kind of tells at least a little bit of like how society runs and, people's general perspectives and opinions at that time. And it's extremely interesting to see how, that changes, even in different genres, you can still see similarities in that. But I like that aspect of it, and also just like the social aspects of it, like, not only like is it created, but how the audience experiences it and how they react, and seeing critic reviews and audience reviews and things like that is also really enlightening, and it really helps. I think it really helps you be a better person in general, and just more knowledgeable about different things. So
yeah, I would agree. I don't remember this experience, but my parents tell me that the first movie I saw in theaters was Finding Nemo, and my mother describes myself as having my eyes wide open and staring at the screen and being totally transfixed on what was happening, and it being a pretty groundbreaking experience for me as a little kid. And I don't remember that specific instance, but I do know that from then on, movies meant a lot to me. And I still have vivid memories of watching the original trilogy of Star Wars on VHS with my parents and my older brother, and how much that meant to me. And so, yeah, I agree with a lot of what both of you have said, and I think film reflects each of us and the creators for sure, in their own unique way, depending on the project. And I guess it's difficult to say what constitutes a good film to me, but at the heart of it, I think it all has to come back to some extent to entertainment, or at least to making the audience feel something. It's always got to come back to the people watching it for me. And that, I think that's a really beautiful concept that can be reflected in practically any genre, be it horror, an action blockbuster, or a musical, or a docudrama, or whatever. There's a powerful universality there, I think. So yeah, and that's about it for our intro stuff with regard to the format of our podcast. And we thought we would finish off with some quick rankings of how we would rank a few different franchises. And I was thinking we would start off with the John Carpenter films that the three of us have seen, and this being Zach's forte, I'll hand it off to him.
Okay, so my favorite director is John Carpenter, or at least one of my two favorite directors, the other one being David Lynch. But So I've shared quite a few John Carpenter films with Christian, and I know Mitchell's seen his share of John Carpenter films as well.
Yeah.
But really, the rankings here are kind of going to be defined on what Christian's seen, because I think he's seen the least of JC of us three.
I am a newbie.
So the films we're going to be ranking are The Thing, In the Mouth of Madness, Prince of Darkness, Big Trouble in Little China, and They Live. Which I read them off exactly how I rank them myself in terms of quality. I think The Thing is a 5 out of 5. It's one of my absolute favorite movies, and I personally consider it to be one of, if not the best horror film of all time. After that's In the Mouth of Madness, I give that a 4 out of 5. I don't think it's as good as The Thing myself, but I really like the subject matter. I like kind of the Lovecraftian horror and the idea of sort of horror being spread through a mentality and being spread through books and pop culture, because that really is a big part of kind of what we think and how we act, and that has a big influence on us. And I think examining that in a horrific way is a really interesting premise. After that, I got Prince of Darkness with a 3 out of 5. I think it's definitely the weakest of the Apocalypse trilogy, which is The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness. But I love the score. I think it's probably my favorite John Carpenter score. And I like how kind of weird and Italian it gets at points with like the insects climbing up the church and the guy who collapses into bugs outside. And then Big Trouble in Little China with a 3 out of 5 as well. I think it's kind of an imperfect action film. John Carpenter directed a couple different action films throughout his career, and though I think they're all pretty good, except for Escape from L.A., which we don't talk about. I think the action is kind of, ironically, the weakest part of a lot of his action movies. But I think Big Trouble in Little China benefits because it's also a comedy. So you've got Kurt Russell in there doing his John Wayne impression, and I think he's hysterical. You've got the really over-the-top kung fu battle in the climax, which I think is extremely entertaining. So I think that's also a solid one. And then They Live, I also give a 3 out of 5. I think it's kind of mid-tier Carpenter, but I think where it really shines is sort of that hard-boiled action dialogue that he gives to Roddy Piper. I mean, I'm here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum has got to be one of the best movie quotes of all time. I think that one still holds up as mid-tier Carpenter, even though some of the action, like I said, is kind of weak. But I'm definitely interested to hear what you guys think of those 5. So I'll toss it off to you, I guess.
Mitchell?
I've never actually seen In the Mouth of Madness, to be honest.
Oh, really?
So I'm gonna have to, believe it or not. So that is on my list of films I must see. Sam Neill's probably best acting role as far as I know.
Sam Neill is great.
But,
He is great.
He's also great on Twitter.
But,
follow him.
Well, yes, but actually no. Okay. Okay, so I would rank them very similar to Zach, but not at all. I would say I listed mine as The Thing, They Live, Prince of Darkness, and Big Trouble in Little China. I also agree that The Thing is a 5 out of 5. I think that honestly, I think the plot itself kind of, the way that it unravels is extremely unique, and I feel as though the actors that they chose can really portray just the actual horror itself. Like, a lot of horror movies tend to just, they try to, like, take the horror and shove it into the audience's faces and be like, this is horror. But it's a lot less blatant. You kind of feel, you don't feel like you're scared. You don't feel like you're, like, you have, like, a certain level of fear or that you're, like, troubled or shocked, but you feel like the definition of horror, like what you're horrified by what's actually happening. Not to get, like, philosophical about it, but it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, if not probably my favorite, just because Kurt Russell that really does wonders playing his role. But yeah, I really like the setting, and this what's it called? Zach, have you read anything having to do with The Thing before?
I mean, I haven't read Who Goes There or Frozen Hell that the movie's based off of. I mean, I've read quite a bit of behind the scenes stuff, if that's kind of what you're talking about, but I haven't read the original stories.
Yeah. I watched the original movie.
Oh yeah.
And in comparison, it's the thing from Another World.
Yeah.
Right. Or
where he's a giant carrot instead of a shape-shifting creature.
Yeah. I mean, that story is really good. But after seeing this one and just having the tons of practical effects, I mean, like the practical effects are just like, I mean, especially for that time, were really remarkable. But I mean, overall, it's really just something you have to see, especially if you're a horror fan. I mean, it's pretty. You're not a horror fan if you haven't seen it. So, I would say They Live is a 4 out of 5, just because first of all, the score. I was just singing it to myself yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Is one thing that really sticks out to me that really sets the tone. It's one of the biggest tone setters. But I would feel as though the cultural issues that it approaches and just the general tenseness, the 1984 type vibes are really, not only for that time, but it's just kind of like a timeless, humans have always been theorizing this type of thing for a long time, and just adding aliens into the equation is pretty much like, it's very appropriate for the time period, and there's no obviously there's obvious reasons why it was really popular. But it's one of my favorite Carpenter films just because of the setting and just the very, you don't really care about it's a lot less character driven. Even though I do feel that Carpenter he's not a full on character driven director, but I feel as though, just the general messages that are, propagated in it are really, extremely interesting to me, particularly. And then Prince of Darkness, I actually haven't watched it in a really long time, so I had to look it up for a little bit, trying to refresh myself. But I think it's probably Carpenter's most disturbing film for sure. The first time I saw it, I was on the younger side, so a lot of what was going on really made zero sense to me.
Well, it doesn't necessarily make much sense to me, but
it's the best thing I've ever seen Alice Cooper do. Ever, probably. Yeah. I'll say that. But I believe it was it relatively low budget?
It was. The movie he made right before it was a big budget film and didn't do great. It might have been The Thing, actually. But whatever it was a big budget movie. It didn't do well, so you had to make it independently. So it's very kind of scrappy and low budget. The only reason Alice Cooper's in it is because his agent helped to finance the film. So he said, "Hey, you want Alice to show up in a couple scenes?" And he was like, "Well, yeah."
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. No, it was. I mean, I understand. I know there's a lot of criticism about it. That not just talking about, like we were saying, character driven. There's nothing. You don't really. A lot of people would say they don't really care about the characters too much, but honestly, it's just the messages behind it and the cheesiness mixed with the disturbing vibes and the score and everything. It gives Carpenter really good credibility in that department.
Yeah.
I feel like he's really can take that and make something very creative out of it. But it's definitely you get goosebumps every time the score starts. But I think the casting is pretty good. Victor Wong.
Yes.
Very fun.
Yes. Yeah.
With his soda and his chopsticks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember the most notable scenes, but anytime I saw I think it was the Anti-God, is that what it was called?
Oh, the Anti-God, the big swirling tank,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that was, I mean, I can't even handle that. That's too much for me. But yeah, as far as I can remember, I do like the diversity of the characters nonetheless, because there's kind of an academic presence, and there's also religious influence as well. So yeah, as far as I can remember, I would definitely give it a 4 out of 5 for that. And then Big Trouble in Little China, I would say, is a 3 out of 5. I personally am not a fan of that type of comedy, to be honest, just in my personal opinion. But in terms of critiquing it as an actual movie for what it was going for, the martial arts parts are actually really entertaining. Even if they're not funny, a lot of the time for me, I do feel like they're, well choreographed for what it was. But yeah, no, I do like. I definitely like Kurt Russell in this as well. I feel like he perfectly embodied the character that Carpenter wanted him to be. And there's nothing too much to say about it. It is what it is. But for what it exists for, I definitely really liked it. But in terms of looking at it from a critical standpoint, I wouldn't feel as though it holds up as a comedy. And it definitely shows, for Carpenter, that it's not that great of a comedy in my opinion. But that's
Yeah, I agree with most of what both of you have said. I know that the right answer is to put The Thing first, and I absolutely love The Thing, and I'm pretty sure I gave it a 5 out of 5. It's a 5 out of 5. But I genuinely love In the Mouth of Madness. Like there are ways in which I enjoy that film and critically view it as better than The Thing, which is, I know, a very hot take, but I just think Sam Neill is so fantastic and is actually more engaging than Kurt Russell is in The Thing in some ways. And I know from a horror perspective, the practical effects in The Thing are fantastic, and the way that the plot unravels is, I don't think I've ever been that captivated watching a movie ever, like in any of my memory. It's and when I first viewed it, it was with Zach, and Zach made a great decision by making the group all go in blind, and we had no expectation for what The Thing would be, and it totally, I'm trying to get my family to watch it blind now, so hopefully they'll come around to it. We'll see, but
hopefully,
In the Mouth of Madness, if it's not a 5 out of 5, it's a 4 out of 5. I really, really love In the Mouth of Madness, so I guess I'd call that a close second to The Thing, but I go back and forth. So we've had some tense arguments about They Live, because after I watched it with both of you, I gave it a 2 out of 5, and I called it boring.
You did.
And
can I have an apology now?
You can have a measurable renege on my comments. I will reconcile my rating to a 2.5 out of 5.
Okay.
I almost gave it a 3. But anyway, from a critical perspective, I have to lend it credit. Like Mitchell said, it communicates cultural messages in a pretty good way, and like Zach cited the iconic line, like that really can't be beat. So it has its moments, and I'll give it credit. And I like the black and white stuff that they do with it. I think that's intriguing, and it does a good job to highlight the robotic nature of the servitude to the aliens, so to speak. And I guess that would be my third favorite somehow. It worked its way up there, so good for They Live. Prince of Darkness is probably also a 2.5 out of 5 for me. And I know Zach doesn't like the half ratings, but for me, I kind of need the flexibility.
It's your own standard.
Yeah. I agree with pretty much everything Mitchell said about Prince of Darkness, how disturbing it is, and I didn't really realize it until Mitchell said it, but I do think it's interesting how it has a scientific and religious perspective at the same time, and that's not something you see a lot in really any film, let alone a horror film. So that was kind of refreshing, and also that was delivered in a way that wasn't, I guess it depends on who you ask, but to me it didn't feel like it was deliberately heretic in nature. Yeah. So I mean, maybe the standards are changing, but it didn't bother me in that regard. So it was fine. It just didn't have the same. I didn't feel nearly as invested in it as I did the first three, and that's more of a personal thing, I guess. But I'll give it a 2.5, and it has merit. It was good, And now we come to Big Trouble in Little China.
Now we come.
Yes. I'll start with the good stuff. there's no denying that Kurt Russell is super. It's got a huge personality, and it's very easy to fall in love with his character to some extent.
Oh, what the hell!
And the action sequences are fine. I guess it's good choreography, and I don't know. I think I agree with Mitchell that the comedy is not my thing, and I don't really think it's stood the test of time. The comedy or like necessarily the cultural appropriateness of some of the moments anyway. So I mean, it's not terrible. I don't hate it, but and in ways it's as entertaining or more entertaining than Prince of Darkness and They Live. But it would just have to be last for me, mostly for a genre reason. Like Mitchell said, I don't think Carpenter's as good as executing the action as he is with the horror. So I'd give it a 2 out of 5. It has merit, but it's not for me, I guess. And, yeah.
I will agree with you to a certain extent on kind of the cultural aspects of it. I think that's an aspect that has sort of dated, because it's a film that's not really intending to be, racist or offensive. What it's trying to do is kind of make fun of this trope that existed in the 80s where anything vaguely like Asian or from China or somewhere along those lines was considered mystical and outlandish, and it's kind of trying to make fun of that. But nowadays, that's not really a trope anymore, so it just kind of comes across as sort of dated and insulting.
Right. Yeah, it's that purpose is kind of, I would just say, it's a little muddled. It's difficult to communicate to begin with. So, yeah. All right, our next franchise for today is the Alien franchise to some extent. My understanding is we're doing Alien, Aliens, and Alien Cubed, as I like to call it. So,
or Alien 3.
Yeah. Mitchell, do you want to lead us off on this one?
Yes. No, I don't.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
The reluctant podcaster.
Yes.
Well, yes, I don't. Yes, okay, I will. Okay, I have to, wait. This is tough, okay?
It is.
Between these three, because once I have, when Alien Resurrections, and I can just throw that at the bottom.
Oh, yes.
We have, can we just throw it at the Alien Covenant was alright, but we're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
Anyway, between the three, between Alien Cubed, Alien S, and Alien,
An Alien
I would
M.
probably, I don't have rankings for them yet, but I would say Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. That's the order, I would say. Alien, I would say, is probably my favorite sci-fi horror movie, which is justified, also very, typical. But, it really, every major aspect of it has been, copied so many times, and, it's just, what is that big brain word that we use for that, when it's, used over and over again?
A cliche or an archetype?
No, it's a good thing. I don't know.
I'm lost. I don't know.
I don't know. It's set a precedent. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay,
It's set
sure.
a precedent.
Yeah, set a precedent, yeah.
Just having, it kind of reminds me a lot of slasher movies, but it's not just a sci-fi slasher movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not literally just Michael Myers, and wow, I killed that. I killed that. Michael Myers in space, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so many different original aspects of it. For example, the actual ship itself, the Nostromo, is actually probably one of the best horror settings in general, just because you have the vents and you have the vastness of the ship, you have the small amount of victims that can fall prey. You have a very, and you also have a very, there's a natural order of things, and you kind of get that perspective from the androids, but you kind of see the what's it called? Losing my words now. Survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
It's very a natural order of things, and it's not. Once again, it's every time you try to apply a cliche to it, it kind of already has a counter to it. Like, it's not just a slasher in space. It's also not just like an animal against humans. I mean, it's an intelligent animal in its own right. It has different ways of, approaching, just how actual, murders happen and things like that. But just beyond that, just the whole concept is so massively original. And I've read the book as well, and I don't think the book holds up to the movie at all, in my opinion. But just having the actual, there's certain things that have to be portrayed on film to actually get the shock and horror factor out of it. But I do think it's obviously very necessary. I think most, if not everybody, should see it at least at one point or another. I would say it's probably a 5 out of 5. I can't think of any reason why I would give it a 4 out of 5. I might have to watch it again just to be 100% sure, even though I just saw it like a month ago. So I would say Aliens is second, and I would think that Aliens is critically better than Alien 3 in my opinion, just because of, I think Alien 3 definitely tries to take aspects of Alien and have its own spin on it and have a completely different setting and things like that. But I do feel like it's a try-hard Alien in my opinion. I do feel like a lot of aspects of it, like and anything they try to improve, I just don't think it falls. I think it falls flat.
Agreed.
In my opinion. I'm trying not to get too specific so I don't spoil anything, just in case. Even though these movies are like old enough, but just in case anyone hasn't happened to see them yet. I'm keeping that incognito. But yeah, in terms of Aliens, I do think the stakes are a lot higher, even though it's obviously, it's just, the stakes are artificially higher. Like, there's no, that's why I would give it a 4 out of 5, and my only reason why I would give it a 4 out of 5, in my opinion. I feel like there's artificially raised stakes. What else am I trying to remember? I took a few notes on this. I'm trying to see where. I should say the casting, by the way. Sigourney Weaver.
Yes.
That is how I think that is a true feminist movie right there, and I really like that how they portrayed that, and even though that obviously was not like the fully intended goal, I do feel like that is a good reference for just entertainment.
Yeah.
And entertainment
I
in
think
general. I do feel like.
I mean, notoriously in the original script, at least the one that Dan O'Bannon wrote before it got rewritten like a million times. None of the characters had specific genders. They were all written so they could be cast in, like, they could cast actors or actresses. And I think that kind of comes across with the character of Ripley, because she's not written to kind of be weak or act like the woman of the team or anything like that. She really kind of gets out there and gets stuff done.
Right. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say about Aliens. When was how much longer after Aliens was it released after Alien?
Alien was, I think, 86, and
Alien was
79.
Yeah.
And Aliens was 86. So it was a pretty big gap.
Yeah.
Oh, and just also, I can mention the actual time period and the aspects of it, how they basically had to make their own future.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't feel like they're trying to fake making the future. It really looked like they spent a lot of time trying to predict what things would be like, just to make it more realistic. And even then, it holds up remarkably well. There's definitely there's its own nostalgia in the futuristic perspective from that period.
Yeah.
And that can definitely be looked at as pretty original. In terms of what I can remember from Aliens, I feel like the atmosphere, I think they definitely continued capturing the atmosphere, and I feel like it's very punchy and, very gritty. I don't really have anything else to say. And in terms of horror, I don't feel as though it's particularly scary, but like I was saying with The Thing, it has a very, it shares the similar aspect where it's horrifying. Like, you're not only shocked, but you're also like, you're just not, it's not just like you can't believe what's happening, but it's also kind of like just the general cinematography and the how people actually die and things like that. And it's not just, it doesn't rely on any gruesomeness or just, like seeing the knife on the shadow on the wall stabbing a victim or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it shows just enough of the deaths, and I do feel like the deaths are very, it's very important to have that done well, especially since the movie's named Alien.
Yeah.
So Alien 3, when I saw it with you guys, actually, I hadn't seen Alien 3 like probably with like 5 years or something like that. Like I saw it when I was pretty young as well. It definitely has a 90s nostalgia to it, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because I know that you can tell that it's from the 90s. I'm not really sure where that exactly stems from specifically, but the Alien Queen, like, okay, that's all right, I guess. I mean, it just wasn't as interesting. I felt you do feel the burnout. You have to recover from the burnout from previous movies, and I feel as though Alien 3 tries to do too much in too little time.
Yeah.
Would probably be my best summary of it. And I would probably give Alien 3 I would go with Christian and give a half. I'd say 3.5 out of 5 because I don't feel comfortable giving it a 3 or a 4. But it's definitely a 3.5 out of 5. And then in comparison to the rest of the Alien franchise, I think it looks even worse, even compared to Prometheus, in my opinion. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, Zach, do you want to go next?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I pretty much agree exactly with Mitchell's rankings. I think Alien is a 5 out of 5 film for me. It's kind of the granddaddy of all space horror films, and as I have found from trying to outline my own space-bound horror film, it's really difficult to write one without blatantly ripping off Alien, just because it's been so influential and is really kind of stuck its tendrils in all aspects of the space horror genre. I would say Aliens is a 4 out of 5 for me. I definitely enjoy it, and it's a great action film, but I do feel there's the theatrical cut and there's the director's cut, which is pretty much the version everybody watches now. But I think the director's cut is a little too long, and I think the theatrical cut could afford to have some extra footage put in it. So I think there's a version right between those two, which would kind of hit the sweet 5 out of 5 spot. But as it is, I think it lags just a smidge, and I just kind of prefer Ridley Scott's directorial style to that of James Cameron. And then Alien 3, I will definitely admit, it's the weakest of the first 3. I think Alien Resurrection is garbage, so I would agree with Mitchell. As soon as you've watched that one, you could throw it all the way at the bottom. But I do think that Alien 3 has a lot of potential. I love the setting. I love the idea of this prison planet filled with these extremely devout monks, and that there aren't any weapons because they're on the honor system. So there's tension not only coming from the alien, but from the fact that you're surrounded by a bunch of criminals that are technically on the honor system, so you can't really know if they're safe to be around. I also like David Fincher's directorial style a lot. I like all the low angles, and I really like the look of the movie. So stylistically and in terms of ideas, I think it's a movie that has a lot going for it, but I definitely agree that it doesn't all fit together perfectly. And I think that's kind of a result of production problems. I mean, it was a notoriously rushed movie. They started building sets before they had a finished script. The producers interfered a ton with what David Fincher wanted to do, and it was his first major motion picture, so he wasn't quite necessarily comfortable, let's say, in kind of a big cinema landscape, producing a massive big budget movie. So having producers looking over his shoulder and messing with what he wanted to do was probably putting even more stress on him in an already stressful situation. So it's definitely a very flawed movie, but I would call it I would say it's the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom of the Alien franchise, in that it's a lot darker, and technically it's probably kind of the weakest of the first 3. I would give it a 3 out of 5.
Oh, but we like Temple of Doom around here, don't we?
I love Temple of Doom myself.
There we go.
But I'd say I probably like Alien 3 a little less than Temple of Doom. I'd give Alien 3 a 3 out of 5, but I think if I'm speaking purely from kind of the heart, I would say it might be my favorite of the first 3, even though I know it's not
Wow.
the best. I definitely have a sweet spot for that movie, even though it's kind of a mess. But yeah.
I'd say Aliens is probably the better Jurassic Park 3, if I had to really put a pin on it. Mixed with Predator, obviously. I do feel like they weren't. I think the action sequences were more warranted than people would have initially thought. I think you'd be expecting too much if you were thinking it was going to be an Alien 2, and that's why they didn't name it Alien 2, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it has a lot going for it, and I do feel as though I think Predator was released afterwards, wasn't it? I think Predator came out in 87.
87 or 89. One of the odd numbers.
Okay. Well, I know it was after, but
yeah.
Just having like the ragtag colonial marines and, having that, I think they made that interesting enough. I think they gave them just the right amount of screen time for what it was.
Yeah.
And, just having, they really did continue a lot of the, horrific aspects of the alien itself and also the environments that it was in on the terraforming planet in Aliens. So that's why I do feel like it's a very justified sequel.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have much more to say beyond what both of you said. I am the holdout in that I personally think Aliens is measurably more entertaining than Alien. Maybe that's just because I'm more of an action guy to begin with, but
possible.
Yeah. I think I don't want to discount Alien in any respect by saying that, though. It's obviously a fantastic film, and critically I would give it maybe like a 4.5. 5 out of 5 is justified too, but I think where I'm coming from with that is sometimes movies with like isolated amazing moments and really great endings sometimes get lifted a little higher than they should, and like the moment when the xenomorph spoiler alert when it comes out of the dude's stomach, I mean, like, you can't beat that, obviously. And I think the ending to Alien is a lot better than the airlock ending Aliens.
They're basically the same ending, though, which is something I like. Aliens is kind of a bigger version of Alien.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, that alone is another reason to knock down the Aliens ending if it's just a knockoff of.
But Alien is a prank. That's the difference. It's a better prank, in my opinion.
Fair
the
enough.
Xenomorph completely just like, she really thought she was out of there, but
Yeah.
And the cat was there too. Jonesy?
Yes.
Is that what his name?
Jonesy, yeah.
Jonesy,
I was so upset because they made
yeah.
me think that the cat didn't make it, but the cat did.
No,
anyway.
The cat came back.
I guess rankings, I mean, personally I'd put Aliens first, but critically I waffle a lot. I mean, I guess I'd give Alien a 4.5 out of 5. Aliens also a 4.5, but I'd critically put Alien first, I guess. And then I also kind of have like what Zach said, I think the concept for Alien 3 with the prisoners is actually really sound and interesting. But I agree with Mitchell with the respect of trying to one-up some of the technical aspects of the first two. Like, for me, the marionettes didn't really work for me. Like, it's an interesting technology, but I didn't find it intimidating or frightening.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
I like the way they move, but they're not keyed in very well.
Yeah.
I'll definitely agree with that.
so,
There's also a lot more running away in Alien 3.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
Like, they have
The whole
places to
climax
run
is just
to.
running.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. All right, I guess we should move on to the big ticket, the Skywalker saga.
For Christian.
The golden ticket.
Yes, I'm gonna lead this one off for obvious reasons.
Yes, for obvious reasons.
So I have two separate rankings. I have personal preference and critical, and for the purpose of this podcast, I'm going to go with my critical rankings because that's more accurately represents what we're going to be discussing here in general, and I know that's what you guys are doing. So,
But you made the other one just to pull a fast one, I understand.
the obvious best one for me. I'm gonna try to keep this relatively short because it's 9 movies and we've been on for a little while. But my clear favorite, or my clear critical favorite, I should say, is Empire Strikes Back. To me, that's indisputably a 5 out of 5. I really don't see any measurable flaws with it. I think my personal favorite part of the movie is Frank Oz's performance as Yoda. It's just a brilliantly achieved puppetry, and so much so that it's measurably more convincing and attaches itself to the audience much more than the CGI counterpart ever did, I would say. And I think Mark Hamill's acting alongside the puppet is really what makes it, of course. And there's no beating the plot twists. I don't think I'm spoiling it for anyone when I say Vader's Luke's father. I hope I'm not.
Dude, come
All
on.
right, we're ending this now, guys. Bye.
But I mean, yeah, 5 out of 5. Not much more to say about that. It's in my eyes a perfect film. Critically speaking, second best, I'd give it to A New Hope, and I also gave A New Hope a 5 out of 5. I think you can argue for a 4, but for me it deserves a 5. Because yeah, so we're gonna get a little tense about this soon. But while I've got the mic, I guess I'd give it a 5 out of 5 mostly because of just the effects and the way that it transformed what Hollywood is today. And I understand that part of Zach's hesitance to give this film a higher rating is because the way it has transformed Hollywood to today is not an entirely positive one to more creative minds. And that, that's a valid point. But I guess my biggest thing with A New Hope is the effects and the sound departments, Skywalker Sound and ILM, and just Lucasfilm as a company overall. That like ILM and Skywalker Sound still to this day work on the vast majority of blockbuster films, and there's no real effects or sound house that even rivals that. And if not for A New Hope, these departments and Lucasfilm, the company, literally would not exist. And I think a lot of times the impact of the effects houses and the more technical side of things goes unnoticed or not as noticed as it should. So that's to me, that's ultimately why I give it a 5 out of 5. Moving softly on, I guess third place, I would say Rogue One, but Rogue One's not Skywalker Saga, so we'll skip that. Third place for me we'll go with Revenge of the Sith. Hot take. It suffers from some of the same issues that the first two prequels have, and the dialogue's far from perfect. But I personally think Hayden Christensen is a fantastic Anakin. I have no qualms with it, and I think George is right when he says people dislike the character, not the actor. And I've seen interviews where Hayden describes his acting as a combination of James Earl Jones's demeanor and David Prowse's physical acting that Jake Lloyd's childish approach, which, first of all, let's think about how
Because he was a child.
Yeah, how that isn't really a reconcilable approach to begin with. To somehow do 50% Jake Lloyd, 50% David Prowse, James Earl Jones. Like, how does one do that? You don't. So, I mean, I think that's largely to explain for his monotone speech patterns on occasion and his muted reactions in certain cases. But I don't know. As far as Revenge of the Sith goes, I think Ian McDiarmid is utterly fantastic. And Ewan McGregor is great. And the duels are great. And I think the CG in Revenge of the Sith really holds up well to today. Considering that movie came out in 2005, it could have came out a couple of years ago, the way it looks, in my opinion. So, next up for me is The Force Awakens, I believe. Not a lot of original stuff with The Force Awakens, to be fair. It's kind of a reworking of A New Hope in many ways. But I think that all of the new talent are really, really great actors. Daisy, John, Adam, and Oscar are all really good in it. And I think Harrison Ford, even if it feels like at times he's not even trying his hardest, is just so utterly likable anyway. Like, it doesn't even matter, almost. So I think that swan song for Harrison and just a return to form, I guess, from the prequels and bringing it back to the way it was meant to be in some respects. I think that was really powerful. So I gave it a 4 out of 5. Yeah, maybe that's high. I don't know, but I liked it a lot. So next up, and this is the really hot take here. My next, critically speaking, my next film is The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9, which was universally canned. And for those that don't know, on Rotten Tomatoes, it is the worst rating of any Star Wars movie, worse than Phantom Menace, worse than Attack of the Clones, critically. So, yeah. It got a lot of heat, but I think a lot of its flaws are flaws that were present in the saga before it came out. It ultimately just feels like Star Wars to me, and Rey, spoiler alert, Rey being a Palpatine is kind of like a thing that comes out of nowhere and isn't totally necessary to some people, unless if you've got qualms with how powerful she is. But I mean, I think you can make the same critical analysis of Leia summarily becoming Luke's sister in Return of the Jedi, kind of out of nowhere. So I think that's maybe a flawed plot twist-y type thing, but it feels like Star Wars to me. And I thought the action was great. I thought Adam Driver turned in such a good performance. Like this film probably made Ben Solo, if not my favorite, my second favorite Star Wars character. I just thought he was great. And of course, Ian McDiarmid is perfect once again. So there are definite flaws in the writing, but you know, the effects are great. The actors are all fantastic. And it felt like a fitting conclusion to me. So I give it a 4 out of 5. Also, Babu Frick. Okay.
Yes, the little merchandising opportunity.
Yes. Steven Spielberg saved him. They were going to kill him off. And Spielberg saw it and was like, it's good, but what happened to Babu Frick? And then they were like, oh my god, we have to put him back in the final battle. Oh my goodness. This is a true story.
Babu Frick didn't become a Sith Lord like Jar Jar did.
Yet.
Getting the hot water here.
Become a Sith Lord yet. He'll get there.
Ooh!
All right. Next up, for me, it's close, and I guess I'll give it to Return of the Jedi. Yeah, I have this ranked unusually low, mostly because of the Leia as Luke's sisters bit. It doesn't bother me. As a Star Wars fan, I can't imagine the universe being any different from them being siblings. Just the way the lore is built around that decision. But from a critical perspective, if you're watching 4 and then 5 and you watch 6 and Leia's his sister, it's like, it just completely comes out of nowhere. It feels just like a cheap resolution to the sort of love triangle thing that they set up in Empire, which is a whole nother uncomfortable thing if they're siblings. And, you know, it's, to me, that's just not a very strong choice. But it redeems itself with the final act, with Luke, the Emperor, and Vader. I think that's just some of the best conclusive storytelling. And Luke laying down his weapon is very powerful. And, of course, Ian McDiarmid, once again, turns in a flawless performance. So yeah, and I enjoy the Jabba sequences, and I am unabashedly an Ewok fan. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. Maybe we'll say 3.5 out of 5. It's not bad. It feels like Star Wars, even with its flaws. So next up, I believe, is The Last Jedi, which I described in my my tweet review as a bizarre mix of the best and worst of Star Wars. Because no matter how hard I try, I can't get around the whole Poe Dameron thing and Vice Admiral Holdo. I just can't understand why she won't give him some semblance of an idea that she has a plan for the Resistance. Like, I just can't get around that, because he's the best pilot. It's not like he's an informant for the First Order. There's no risk in telling him your plan, and so that completely falls flat. And the Finn and Rose stuff, I never loved, and I used to really dislike it. I don't dislike it as much now. And I think Rose is an important character in many respects, with representation, and I think Rian Johnson's idea to sort of portray the everyman in the Resistance is a nice idea. And in that same regard, I think part of her being this sort of mechanic everyman thrust into the spotlight is why I wasn't as bothered by her being written out of Rise of Skywalker. To me, that made more sense to her character and doesn't necessarily contradict what Ryan was going for, because she had her moment and she's a hero, and her message is, or the message her character is associated with is that anyone can be a hero, I guess, which is powerful. And I guess Ryan was going for a similar thing with the whole Rey's parents were nobody, and that was kind of retconned, I guess, but, whatever. I think Ryan's a good writer, and just some of it felt rushed, but the Kylo Ren and Rey stuff and the Luke stuff is just super resonant to me. That to me is the best of Star Wars, is the connection between Rey and Ben, and the amazing moments in the throne room with Snoke. I don't think you can really beat that. And this movie really made Rey's character for me. And Rise of Skywalker didn't necessarily undo it for me, but to me, this is where Rey is at her best. And in terms of visual appeal, I think this is the best Star Wars film. Just how beautifully it's shot. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5. And now we move on to the Black Sheep. Attack of the Clones. I gave it a 3 out of 5. That's unusually high, and a lot of people think Phantom Menace is better. But ultimately, I don't think Hayden Christensen is that bad. Like I said with Revenge, his scene with Padme after he murders the Sand People, when he rants about, and this is kind of turned into a meme, unfortunately, but the not just the men, but the women and the children, I slaughtered them. Like I get chills. And yeah, it's a little over the top, sure, but I get chills every time I watch that scene without fault. And the ending is his whole, I'm a Jedi, I know I'm better than this. It's just like, oh, this character is doomed to fail, and it's inevitable, and it's just, and in many ways, I think that tragedy hits harder than some of the happiness in the OT. So, yeah, I think Christensen, Portman, and McGregor do what they can with the weak dialogue, but I have to give the CGI its credit for that time. For 2002, it looks really great, and I thought Jango Fett was a fantastic supporting character, and of course Christopher Lee is great. And the crown jewel of this one is Yoda dueling Count Dooku. I think is one of the best moments in the entire saga. So, yeah, I give that a 3 out of 5. Maybe that's unusually high, but now we move on to the last one, Phantom Menace. For the record, I don't think Phantom Menace is a terrible film, but, Jar Jar is a little oversaturated. I don't hate Jar Jar. I think he has, like, a funny moment or two, perhaps. But, it's
That's a ringing endorsement if I've ever heard one.
I guess I would just say that there are instances of studios not giving directors enough control, and where directors don't know when to stop. And George Lucas is just got a little too much going on for himself in this one, I think. He thinks he's a better writer than he is. And there's still some strong performances. Like, I think Liam Neeson is great. Ewan McGregor shines, and Ian McDermott in sort of a supporting role in this one is really great. And I think Natalie Portman is great, to her credit as well. But Jake Lloyd and is just, there's a way that childish approach kind of makes you pity the Darth Vader idea more, and it's very foreboding in its inevitability. But Jake Lloyd's still not a good actor. It's just the honest truth. I was reading a book, a Phantom Menace book, and in the back they've got short profiles about the cast, and the Jake Lloyd's story is he's talking to his parents, and he just like decides one day that he wants to become an actor. So him and his parents just moved to California, and they're like, okay, Jake, we'll help you become an actor. And that's apparently how
That's
we got
what happens with
cast.
a lot of kid actors, but
This is apparently how we got cast in Star Wars. I mean,
well, he was in Jingle All the Way first.
oh, okay.
The beloved Arnold Schwarzenegger film.
Got me there.
That's probably what I know.
Anyway, I don't hate him. I think there are benefits to that childish approach, and it's saddening that his personal life has gone downhill after the film. But Liam Neeson's great. Again, I will argue in favor of the effects and note that Phantom Menace used the most miniatures out of any Star Wars film. So, to their credit, good effects, especially for 1999, and a few strong performances. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. So, I guess my rundown would be Empire is best, then A New Hope, then Force Awakens, then... Or no. Empire, A New Hope, Revenge of the Sith, Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, Return of the Jedi, Last Jedi, Attack of the Clones, Phantom Menace, in that order. Whew, that was a long speech. Who wants to go next?
I mean, I don't want to belabor any points. I have gone on record as being kind of moderately sick of Star Wars. I was a massive fan of the original films and even the prequels to some extent when I was a wee lad. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of recognized just how sort of overexposed the whole thing has become, and it's kind of been marketed and advertised into the ground to the point where I'm kind of just sick of it now. So I have kind of the opinions of a standard Star Wars normie, I would say. Empire Strikes Back is by far, I would say, the best one, my favorite. I give it 4 out of 5. After that, I would have A New Hope. I think that it's an important film. It's a film that's had a big impact on cinema and cinema history. But once you take off the trappings of the special effects and the editing and the sound, you have a very, very simple, basic story there. Red Letter Media has referred to George Lucas as the luckiest man in Hollywood, because he's a guy who seems to not have a massive amount of talent as a director or a filmmaker, who has surrounded himself with people who really know what they're doing and can make his ideas better. And I think A New Hope is kind of a testament to that. It's this film that started from a kind of not great script that has been made into this historical blockbuster because of the people he associated himself with. So I would give that a 3 out of 5 myself. After that, we got Force Awakens, as you mentioned, kind of a carbon copy of A New Hope. So I think it only makes sense that it would get the same rating as A New Hope with a 3 out of 5. I think the strong points to Force Awakens resemble the strong points to A New Hope, and the weak points to Force Awakens resemble the weak points in A New Hope because it follows such a similar story. After that, I have Return of the Jedi, which I really like the opening stuff on Jabba's barge. I'd say that might be some of my favorite stuff in the original trilogy happens at the beginning of Jedi, and I think it kind of starts to fall apart a little bit as soon as they leave the barge, because they don't necessarily have a lot to do. Some characters don't really have much to do, so they kind of get written off as sort of just basic ground troops, and other characters are just kind of up in space for massive chunks of the movie and don't really do much either. But I think that first part is really strong and makes it deserving of the 3 out of 5 that I gave it. Then we have Last Jedi. As you mentioned, it's a beautiful movie. The compositions in this are really, really stunning. I would say that I think Rian Johnson is a fantastic writer and director, but I don't think he's a great writer and director for Star Wars. I think I have been really impressed by all of his movies, and if this movie was rewritten so that it wasn't a Star Wars movie and was just its own science fiction space comedy thing, I think it'd probably work a lot better. It's just his style of writing, though good, doesn't really feel at home in the Star Wars universe, and to me makes Last Jedi a 2 out of 5. And then we have Revenge of the Sith, which I don't like, but I will admit that it is the best of the prequels. Similar to Return of the Jedi in a way, I think the stuff that happens at the beginning is sort of the stuff I like the best. The whole
Really?
we gotta rescue Palpatine.
Interesting.
And General Grievous comes out of a closet coughing into his hand or something like that. I think that's some of the most entertaining stuff in the prequel trilogy. That's like the Jabba's barge of the prequel trilogy to me, and kind of saves that movie from falling into the dirge of the first two. It at least makes it a 2 out of 5 for me. Then Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, for me, are both 1 out of 5s. I think they have basically no redeeming features. I don't like either of them at all.
Dear.
I think if I was going to take one over the other, if I was going to pick my poison, I'd probably pick Attack of the Clones, because I have fond memories of Jango Fett, who was my favorite Star Wars character when I was a whippersnapper. I think the gladiatorial sequence is kind of fun, and I really like Christopher Lee as an actor. He has basically nothing to work with here, but I think him showing up in basically anything lends a certain element of respectability, and I can appreciate that. But Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace are still 1 out of 5s for me. And then we come to the last on my list, which has frustrated Christian, but The Rise of Skywalker, I think, is probably my least favorite Star Wars movie.
Oh my god. I can't believe you put it under Phantom Menace. I cannot believe that.
While Phantom Menace is a more boring movie, to me, Rise of Skywalker is almost insulting, because to me it represents the worst of corporate filmmaking, because I see all the fan references and all the fan service, and I look at the script that's so confused and so jumbled and has so many dead ends, and the film ends up looking like Disney rattling its car keys in Star Wars fans' face so they don't pay attention to the faults of the overall story. I understand that a lot of Star Wars fans, or some Star Wars fans that happen to include you, Christian, don't see that, and I think that's perfectly fine. But to me, going into it without that preconceived kind of I love Star Wars notion, I was just very bored and kind of ticked off with the movie for the entire time that I watched it. And to me, that makes it a 1 out of 5. Those are my rankings, but I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about it, Mitchell.
Okay. Wow. Thanks, Zach. Thank you. I appreciate it. Empire Strikes Back is a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
I don't think there is anything wrong with it. I feel as though A New Hope leaves a simple and easy-to-follow foundation that Empire Strikes Back just throws everywhere in so many interesting ways that, I mean, even if you did expect it, just the impact and the, just the acting. I mean, even though the acting isn't, like, obviously, we're not talking about top-billed actors, but James Earl Jones and just, like, he's just completely takes it away, and Mark Hamill is, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it really leaves me speechless. It really blurs the good and evil aspects that were laid in A New Hope, and and just in that in general already makes it a 4 out of 5 for me. But giving it a 5 out of 5 really just comes from the huge number of iconic moments in it, and just the amounts of peril that are very effective. You have obviously Luke and Darth Vader, their lightsaber battle. The entire Hoth sequence is probably my favorite Star Wars moment ever, I think. Believe it or not.
Wow.
Han Solo, obviously. Han Solo is my favorite Star Wars character, and that was very depressing. What happens with him? But it really does. It stands very well as a standalone story, and it also stands very well in the original trilogy, of which I'm an elitist for. So A New Hope would also be my second. I would give A New Hope a 4 out of 5. I feel as though it's not in a way that it kind of sets a precedent, but it's more of a way as though it has so many, it tries to do so much, and it definitely dabbles in so many different genres, and I do feel as though it is there is some too much simplicity and vagueness in some aspects of it, that it tries to attempt to be certain things that it's not outside of a space opera. But in terms of what it does well, I do feel like I think we all agree that the editing definitely saved the whole movie in general.
For sure.
It saved the story, and it definitely saved the cinematography and the amount of time that they spent on certain plot elements. In my opinion, was perfect. But I wouldn't say that it's super groundbreaking, or it's a super everybody should follow this. I mean, obviously it's one of the most successful movies of all time. But just the large scale of everything, and it really does create its own universe. And I do feel as though it's very difficult for a sci-fi movie to do that, to kind of create a universe out of thin air. And the original movie is called Star Wars. It wasn't called Episode 4. So I do feel as though it intentionally in some, unintentionally in others, creates a very dynamic universe that can definitely be built upon, or in George Lucas's case, tampered with a little bit with the prequels. But so obviously, like I said, original trilogy purist, but I would say Return of the Jedi is my third. And my primary reason for giving it a 4 out of 5 instead of something like a 3 out of 5 is also the beginning sequences. So I definitely agree with Zach. I do feel as though the original, or the earlier scenes, especially with Jabba and things like that, is a very welcoming introduction, and plays right off of the end of Empire Strikes Back. The way that they conclude it, that was obviously their main goal, was to conclude Luke Skywalker's journey, at least as far as we knew that we would have known at that time. There's definitely a lot more dynasty. There's more dynamic character traits that Luke definitely possesses. Yoda is definitely a key factor in that. And like Christian said, obviously that performance is completely unforgettable. But yeah, I mean, when you really get to understand Luke in general, I do feel as though it is very much a Luke Skywalker film, just like Rise of Skywalker is very much a Rey film. But that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to get too into it, but yes, Return of the Jedi is 4 out of 5 for me, and there is some critical. It's not fully critical, and it's partially my opinion in that way, so I don't take it home. My fourth is Revenge of the Sith. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. I would say that I think there's a lot more to Christensen and Portman than most people would say. I don't feel as though I don't feel as though it's a masterful romance, and it's so their performance is just completely convincing, but which is the reason why I'd still give it a 4 out of 5 in my opinion, just because of the ending scene, literally just because of the last probably 20 minutes of the movie. I don't know exactly, but if I could remember, probably the last 20 minutes redeem it. Just Anakin, just
with the lava fight.
Yeah, and I've said before, the formula is true here as well. This is Anakin's fall from grace, I guess you could say. And Palpatine definitely is a very convincing villain as he becomes one. Yeah, but that's really much all I have to say about that. There's the darkness and it kind of shows why Rogue One is a lot better movie than most people would think, just because of introducing that, very dark, and, you wouldn't even have thought that they would be as dark as they would, considering how lighthearted, particularly in, A New Hope was, and even Empire Strikes Back in a lot of regards. But yeah, and in terms of the original trilogy and Revenge of the Sith, I do feel as though Revenge of the Sith is probably the best of the prequels, by far, actually. And then my next one is Rise of Skywalker, which I would give a 4 out of 5. And I was watching.
Ooh, yeah.
I came into it the first time and second time in the same way. I feel like I liked it the first time better than the second time, and that's probably just my Star Wars, bias. But seeing it for the first time, I was definitely looking at it very critically because I really wanted to have a good, firm understanding of how I actually felt about it. In terms of what it had to accomplish and what it actually accomplished, it is definitely a 4 out of 5. I do feel as though it really. I do feel as though there's a lot that I don't want to be like that typical guy on Twitter, but like there's a lot that The Last Jedi really they had to have retconned in some ways in Rise of Skywalker. I'm not saying that Rise of Skywalker completely kills The Last Jedi or anything, but in terms of what even as a standalone movie, I feel as though that Rey, they added a level of complexity to Rey in a way that's convincing enough to me, because personally I don't really like Rey that much, and I don't even feel that the sequels were even necessary to exist in the first place. So I have that. But I do feel as though what they had with Rey at first, the beginning of the movie, and what they had at the end, there's very notable improvements in her character, and there's always debate as whether or not she deserves to be Rey Skywalker, in my opinion, but there is debate there. But for what it's worth, the effects are really good. Poe Dameron's character is definitely redeemed. I liked pretty much everybody. I liked Leia Sendoff, definitely. Spoiler.
Oh yeah.
The only aspects I didn't like about it were the way that they did Chewie, which was a controversial. I know that was a risk to do that, but I did not like that. Emotionally or critically, did not like that.
Yeah.
And the other one is just the forced romance at the end. I feel as though the forced romance almost in my opinion, just because of that, it comes close to how severe it was seeing Leia and Luke. But that's just my opinion. That's solely my opinion. I just did not like that. That really hurt the vibe for me. And also Kylo Ren. Adam Driver, I don't feel as though I feel as though there are some aspects of him that he has to embody a certain archetype as a villain, and I feel that they strayed too far away from that archetype that Star Wars set out to achieve with all of their villains. And I feel as though they took too many risks with him. Even though I do feel as though he's a very good actor, I don't feel as though he is suited for that role, in my opinion. So in terms of The Force Awakens, I would definitely agree with Zach. It carbon copies a lot from A New Hope. I think in terms of how the sequel could have been and what it was, I feel as though it achieved a lot. It definitely achieved a lot in that. But I liked Finn. This is definitely Finn at his greatest. I feel as though there's a lot of potential laid down for Finn. I don't feel as though the next two movies helped him in that regard at all. But I think Finn was probably my favorite character in The Force Awakens. The way that Han Solo, how he turns out, I liked that as well. I think there's different ways that could have gone about that, but for Kylo Ren's character, I feel as though it definitely fits him very well, and you can see him carry that emotionally later on. So, Force Awakens is not my favorite movie. As a Star Wars movie, I don't really like it very much, but in terms of a foundation-setting movie for the next two, it is very strong in that regard. That's why I went and said 3.5 out of 5. Last Jedi, I gave it 3 out of 5. I completely agree with a lot of what most people were saying at the time. Just Admiral Holdo. I mean, and the end wasn't really impactful. I mean, there's really nothing else to add after what you guys said with that. But I do feel like its redeeming qualities are the throne room scene and the effects and some of the planets, some of what they show at the planets. I do feel like Crate is a neat concept, but a lot of concepts, not too much achieved is my overall view of that. And then my last ones would be Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace. So, Attack of the Clones, I really wanted to give a 2 out of 5, but I wanted to give it a 2.5 out of 5, and really just...
Yeah.
Okay, so really... Okay,
I was skirting the line there.
So Christensen is terrible. It's okay, I'll say that.
Bro.
I'm sorry. I do not like Christensen's performance in this. His performance. His character, Anakin's character there is some dynamic to be seen there. Okay. There is a good love story there, in my opinion. Critically, I don't think there is very much chemistry between Pat Portman and Christensen. Just my opinion. I should just say that after every sentence. I think that would serve him very well.
I think that's down to the director.
I think Obi-Wan pretty much saves the movie. I think him being as compelling as he was, is definitely that there is a hidden gem there. There is John Williams also. Basically, half the Star Wars movies would be 1 out of 5 without John Williams. Let's be totally honest.
I didn't mention John Williams once. What is wrong with me? Yeah, he's the most.
Collect his debt, Christian.
He makes my favorite score.
He's
Carpenter
the most important
is
part of
literally
Star Wars,
second.
hands
okay.
down.
Williams is first, Carpenter second. But anyway.
I mean, they're totally
different
different
I know.
artists.
But
It's
in
really
musical
difficult to
taste,
compare their musical styles.
Musical taste, Zach. Okay.
Yeah.
It's Attack of the Clones is mostly a disappointment in my opinion. Mostly for what it should have been, it really did not achieve the greatness that it was going for. And then Phantom Menace, not too much to add. Everybody's annoying, basically.
Poodoo.
Pretty much everyone except Qui-Gon is annoying at some
Qui-Gon
point in the movie.
saves the movie, gives it a 2 out of 5 for me. That's how important Qui-Gon is to me. And young
Obi-Wan has annoying
okay.
moments.
Yes, but he's annoying. Young Anakin, I just But then this movie as a disappointment actually saves Revenge of the Sith in a way. I feel as though seeing Anakin as a young kid definitely adds to the darkness of Revenge of the Sith. So it's a good crutch for Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion. In that, at least for Anakin. So those are my opinions. You're welcome.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right, boyos. Oh, goodness. I hit my mic. Sorry, Mike.
Loud sound.
All right. Well, I guess we were going to do a Batman movies now. Do you think we have enough time to squeeze that in here?
I think we might have overstayed our welcome a little bit. But...
All right. Well, we'll keep it in mind, I guess. Maybe in the future episode.
Maybe we'll come back to it. Yeah.
That was our grand extended length intro episode, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Yep. Introduction.
Yeah. Zach, would you like to give them a quick preview to the next episode and the film we're focusing on?
Sure. Next episode, I picked the film for. So we're going to be talking about the film The Changeling, starring George C. Scott. It's kind of a notorious cult horror film. I haven't seen it myself. Mitchell, you might have seen it. I'm not sure.
Nope.
But I know Christian definitely hasn't. Oh, great. We all haven't seen it. So all have new opinions to bring to the plate on that one. So yeah, tune in next time if you'd like to hear us talk about The Changeling.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I'm not sure if we mentioned this before, but the person who picks the film will also be the person hosting the episode, so to speak. So the next episode will be Zach's to host. And thank you for stopping by. This has been Cookie Pocket, an attempt at a podcast. And see you next time.
All right. See you next time.
Au revoir.